Hey everybody, Yankee here. Today I want to come on here and make a video talking about how Colt has a real problem. There is an epidemic of Colt revolvers breaking, and they're breaking because they switched to MIM parts on important parts of the gun that should never be MIM, like hammers. Or at least that's what some people want me to come on here and say. That's what they want me to talk about. Because I got some nasty emails. One was from someone who gave me quite a tongue lashing about a video I did yesterday. And they said, "How dare you come online and lie to people? Are you shilling for Colt? How much are they paying you?" Well, Colt ain't paying me nothing. I guess they'd probably rather I didn't talk about their guns, to be honest. But they're like, "You're telling everyone these guns don't use MIM parts and they don't break." And yes, they do. You know, my cousin had one that lasted 20 rounds. And that's kind of what started the whole thing, because in the video before I had said that, I seen a lot of comments on my videos about Colt saying, "My cousin bought one that broke in 20 rounds. They all break." So I said I was concerned about that, and I went and did some research, and then I wasn't concerned anymore. That's basically all said. But from that, they took, "Oh, Colts don't break, and they don't use MIM parts, and all this other stuff. They're the best revolvers in the world." Well, I do think they're probably the best production revolver. As far as triggers and everything like that's concerned, I think Smith & Wesson makes the 686, which is better, slightly better overall, but I prefer Colts. To me, they're the best. But like I said, I did not claim they don't use MIM parts, and I did not claim they don't break, because here's the reality. They do use MIM parts. They even use MIM hammers. But you know who else does? Well, I did a video on Smith & Wesson and their MIM hammers. Taurus uses them. Hell, Ruger's basically an all MIM gun, practically. They're cast guns. They're not even forged frames. So this whole, "Oh, it's MIM, it's going to break, and they're all breaking," is really internet hysteria. Like I said, I didn't say they don't break. I said I did my research, and then I wasn't concerned. There didn't seem to be a systemic problem with the Colt revolvers. There wasn't an epidemic of breakages. At least not any more so than there are with other guns. In fact, the guns I found the most issues with were Ruger's, supposedly the strongest gun made. But Colts do break. It can happen. Any manufacturer that uses parts can have parts that go bad, parts that break. Now, being MIM in itself doesn't mean a part is going to break. A lot of people confuse MIM for the old compression molding, where they just compressed, metal sand into a part and it hardened to a certain degree, but generally not fully. You got like 75, 80% hardness. Well, now the new MIM system, their injection moldings, they come out with like 90 to 97% hardness. They're as hard as forged parts were 30 years ago. So the part being MIM itself is not anything to worry about. That's just an ignorance of the process. But here's the thing. Anytime you make any part, there can be some bad ones. I mean, look at automotive manufacturers. Look at all the recalls lately because someone, made ball bearings that were slightly out of spec. Or made seals, rubber seals that, were 5 degrees off on what temperatures they could handle. So they had to do recalls on certain cars and bring them back in, fix them. That happens. And it can happen with guns too. But here's the thing, guns don't have a huge profit margin. So if there's one part that's causing a manufacturer to have to take in a lot of guns and fix them, they're going to fix that part. They're going to have a better one in all the new guns, and they're going to replace the old ones with the better part. Because, like I said, not enough profit margin to be bringing in all the guns that are supposedly breaking. Now, if it's just like we got a bad batch of these, like we got a bad batch of Sears and it affected this model of gun from this serial number to this serial number, they might do limited recalls over something like that. Or they might even say, "Hey, we got a couple of bad Sears. The chances of them breaking are like 5%, but that's 5% more than there should be. We're just going to let them work their way out of the system. If they break, we'll fix them." Which I don't agree with on guns. You should do a recall for anything you know is a problem. Right off the bat. But here's the thing, you can't get rid of all defects. It's going to happen. In fact, a viewer sent me a picture of their Colt that broke, and to me it looks like this was a defective part. If you look here, the part of the hammer broke off. And if you look at the hammer inside their gun, you can see here's the hammer, and this little part in red here, that's where that part that broke off would go. That's where it would be. And that is so you can take that little piece that looks like a chain link there and hook it up under it, and it hooks to the hammer spring, and that makes the hammer operate. And that broke off. Now that is probably because they got a faulty piece, and that can happen. Like 1 out of every 100,000 might come out bad. Or if they're really a bad manufacturer, 1 out of every 1 might come out bad, and the people who bought that part and used it will have to deal with that. And like I said, they probably will, but that's just not the case. Like I said, I did the research. There was no epidemic of Colts breaking. Remember, on the internet, if something breaks, you're going to see it 50 times if it happens once. If it happens twice, you're going to see it 1,000 times. And 3 times and 4 times and so on. And you got to remember, there's a lot of guns out there. And if 1 or 2 breaks, that's not to be outside the margin of error on any manufactured part. You cannot get rid of possible defects. It happens. And in the case of this one, this broken piece that I showed y'all, it looks to me, if you look at the broken area, there might be some voids or some bad areas in this. Because it didn't clean break. It looks to me like there's some rounded divots in it, which would make me think there were some voids, some bad material in this. Like they didn't mix the binder properly with the metal or whatever. And that can happen. But there's a big difference between saying things can break and this thing is always breaking. There's just no evidence of that. And you know something that broke all the time? You know, old guns broke. That's why gunsmiths had such a business. If guns didn't break, you wouldn't have needed gunsmiths. We needed gunsmiths back then. Nowadays, you don't need them as much. Parts don't break as often. Parts are easier to replace and buy, so you don't need gunsmiths as much. So, if anything, you have a smaller chance of a part breaking today, even a MIM part. Like I said, do your research on MIM parts. See how strong they are. See how they're often stronger than old forged parts. And when someone tells you any gun is having all of them break, well, remember that person is probably being a little bit dramatic. Or maybe they have an agenda. You know, maybe they don't like that manufacturer and they want to promote every bad thing they can hear while ignoring it from others. It's like Glock owners who love to laugh when they see a 1911 fail, but they'll ignore a Glock failing right next to them at the range. Oh, there must have been a reason for it. You know, when it's the other gun, when it's Colt, it's the gun. Colts are garbage. Or Smith & Wesson's garbage. But when it's the Glock, well, there's a reason. It's got to be the ammo or something. People have their biases. And no, I am not so biased that I said they don't use MIM parts. Because they do. They all do. I didn't say they don't break, because they can. What I said is, it isn't an epidemic. It isn't anything to worry about. MIM parts are not anything to worry about. And I wish people would educate themselves to it a little bit more. I wish people would be a little more reasonable on what they see and what they believe on the internet. Because like I said, remember, everybody has an agenda. Most people are getting paid for their opinions. And some people's experiences are different. Like when people ask me about the tit sauce, or tit sauce as I call them. When they ask me, hey, what about these guns? I'm like, never buy one. I bought one and I had to replace every part in it just to get it to function. And that's the truth. That's my experience. But there's thousands and thousands of people who think they're great. So temper what you hear me say, because it's just based on my experience. It's one thing that happened that I have conflated into an issue for the entire line. And you have to remember, a lot of people do that about a lot of things, and a lot of times it's not even about experience. It's about prejudice, it's about bias, it's about preference, and often it's about money. Please hit that like button and share this video on whatever social media you have. Since this is a restricted channel, you're the only chance we have to overcome YouTube's anti-2A bias and discrimination.